Good afternoon. I'm Sharon Gaber. I'm honored to serve as Chancellor for UNC Charlotte. I'd like to take a moment on behalf of the university to welcome you to the 2021 Virtual State of Housing in Charlotte Summit. With my background in city and regional planning, I've been following this report closely as an example of the important work we're fulfilling as North Carolina's Urban Research University. I'm looking forward to reading the full report. Over the past 3 years, this report has quickly become a go-to source for journalists and governmental leaders as they examine growth here in Charlotte and seek reliable data. As I'm sure you're well aware, Charlotte remains one of the hottest housing markets in the country. As cities nationwide watch closely the ways Charlotte manages its growth, the Childress Klein Center for Real Estate is providing a foundation for smart development through this report. A big thank you to our industry partners who provide us with the funding to support this important multi-year research project. Welcome again to the 2021 State of Housing in Charlotte Summit and for your support of UNC Charlotte.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jennifer Troyer, Dean of the Belk College of Business here at UNC Charlotte. On behalf of the Belk College and the Childress Klein Center for Real Estate, I am pleased to welcome you to the 2021 State of Housing Virtual Summit. So a special welcome to our elected officials who are attending the summit today. Remember, following the presentation, please join us for an industry panel discussion on the state of housing in the Charlotte region. So we start today with the presentation of our 2021 State of Housing in Charlotte report, followed by a question and answer session. You can submit your questions at any time via the chat function. For those of you on Twitter, you can join today's conversation by using hashtag #CLTHousing. We look forward to seeing and sharing your tweets. And now it is my pleasure to introduce my colleague, Dr. Yongqiang Chu. So Dr. Chu is the director of the Childress Klein Center for Real Estate and the Childress Klein Distinguished Professor of Real Estate and Urban Economics. He's a highly regarded scholar. He's done groundbreaking research in real estate, in corporate finance, and in banking. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Chu.
Now let me share my screen and start my presentation. So thank you all for attending this event. So first of all, I would like to thank all our sponsors who supported us through these years for this summit. So Canopy Realtor Association, Crossland Southeast, Evergreen Strategy Foundation, Inlivian, Piedmont Public Policy Institute, and True Homes. Thank you very much. Without your support, this event wouldn't be possible. So now let me just jump into the report. I'm going to start with the owner-occupied housing market. I'm going to start with the single family. Of course, I'm going to talk a little bit also about the other owner-occupied market as well. So I'm going to start with the house prices, the single family house prices during COVID. So this figure shows you the monthly house prices from January 2020 to September 2021. That's when we started to do this research. So our data cuts at that time. So as you can see, the price, so we are here providing you both the median price and the average price for both the Mecklenburg County and the Charlotte region. So when we say Charlotte region, we mean the 8 counties, including Mecklenburg, the other 7 counties all bordering Mecklenburg. So that's Cabarrus, Gaston, Iredell, Lincoln, Lancaster, York, and Union County. So as you can see, the prices increased very significantly during this 21 month period. So So one of the things that I want to want you to take away is all the crazy stories you heard about house prices are probably true. So from our data, just from September 2020 to September 2021, so that's an annual change, the annual growth rate in the region in terms of median house price has increased at 16.3%. Okay, so what does that tells us? So the other way to look at it is we can look long-term historically. So here, what I'm also providing you is the long-term view of the house prices starting from 2001 up until 2020. Of course, as you can see, like since 2010, after the recession, the house price has increased by a lot. However, average growth rate from 2010 to 2020 is only about 6% in the region. Okay, this is nowhere close to the 16.3% growth rate we experienced during COVID. So if anything, the growth of house price is speeding up, really speeding up in this region during COVID. All right. So the other thing to look at you probably heard a lot of people talking about that the market is really tight and it's really hot. So the other way to look at it is to look at how many days a listed house will be on the market before it's under contract. So here what I'm plotting is the median days on the market during, again, the COVID period. As you can see, before COVID, January 2020, the median days on the market was 22 days, okay, which was already very tight. Okay, later I will provide a historical view. You can see 22 days is already very low. But look at what happened during COVID, right? So in June and July of 2021, the median days of houses on the market was only 3 days. That means if you list your house, let's say today, 3 days later, your house will be under contract. Okay, so this suggests that the market has been really, really tight. And let's put this into a more historical perspective. Okay, so the 3 days or 4 days for most part of 2021 median on the market is very, very low, even compared with the early 2000s, really the booming years, right? So in early 2000, you can see the median days on the market was 40 something days. And in 2006, it was 37. Okay, of course, everything shot up during the recession, 2009, 2010, even 2011. But what we are experiencing right now is historical. We've never seen this before. Okay, 3 days on the market. That's the median days on the market. All right, so the other thing I want to show you is like how tight or how hot the market was, is to look at the percent of houses that are sold above listing prices, right? So again, here what I'm showing you is the monthly percent of houses sold above listing prices during COVID period. Okay, so before COVID, January 2020, the number's really low, 5-6%. But it kept increasing since COVID started, and it reached almost 60% in June of 2021. So in June of 2021, about 60% of houses are sold above their listing prices. This can tell you that how strong the demand was during COVID, right? And again, this number is also historical. We've never seen this kind of numbers ever in history. So here what I'm plotting is the annual percent of houses sold above listing prices starting from 2001 to 2020. Okay, so as you can see, for most years before 2020, the percent of houses sold below listing prices are way under 20%. Okay, the only exception is 2017. It's a little bit over 20%, but that's 20%. That's nowhere near the 60% number we are seeing during COVID. So this is again very, very dramatic changes in this market, suggesting two things. First one is that the demand is very, very strong in the Charlotte area. All right. The second thing, of course, is that supply is very, very limited. I would say extremely limited in the area. Okay, so that's why once you list a house, you will instantaneously receive multiple offers with offer prices above your listing prices, and you can quickly sell your house because there's just very limited supply in this market during COVID. Okay, so of course, on the demand side, people can often talk about there are many factors contribute to the demand side, right? So there is this macro conditions where the inflation rate is very low, right? And more COVID related, because people want to move to a larger house, and they're out-of-state buyers coming to Charlotte because they can work from home. People from New York, all those high-cost areas moving to Charlotte. So that's very strong supply, strong demand. But at the same time, we have extremely limited supply. Okay, so the extremely limited supply is not just a problem of during COVID. We had the same problem even before COVID. Okay, so the price growth has been there even before COVID. If you read our report last year or the year before, you can see the annual growth rate in house prices has been steadily increasing in 2019, in 2020. Of course, COVID made things just a lot worse in that regard, right? So in 2020, the growth rate was like 8%. In 2019 was 7%. Remember I said like from 2010 to 2020, the average growth rate was 6%. So you can see the house price growth rate has been speeding up, and COVID made it a lot worse. Okay, so these are of course first fueled by a strong demand, which I consider is a good thing because we all want Charlotte to grow. And Charlotte is a great city. We all want Charlotte to grow. Okay, so a strong demand, I think that's a good thing. But when the strong demand meets with very limited supply, then we need to worry about housing affordability issues, which I'm going to touch on a little bit now. So here what I'm showing you is the price distribution of houses that are sold from January to September of 2021. Okay, it's probably not going to be very easy for you to read this plot, but here I'm just going to give you some numbers. So in 2021, only 4.39% of houses, single family houses, are sold under $150,000. Okay, so why do we pick like $150,000? Because this is traditionally considered as a starter home price that people should be able to afford. But now we only have like 4.4% of houses that are sold under $150,000. Okay, so the number was 6.53% in 2020. Okay, so we have fewer and fewer houses that are sold under $150,000. Now, even if we are looking at a much higher price, let's say $300,000, I would consider the $300,000 as like the typical starter home price in Charlotte region now. Okay, we only have about 35% of houses in 2021 that are sold under 35%. And this number was 49% in 2020. This is a huge change. We had about half of the houses sold under $300,000 in 2020, but now we only have 35%. Okay, and these numbers are just going to get lower because the prices are going to continue to increase. Okay, although the price increase will be a little slower. Okay, we're probably not going to be seeing like 16.3% annual growth rate going forward, especially once we get out of COVID. But we are still gonna, my guess is we are still probably gonna see close to double-digit growth rate in house prices in this region in the near future. Okay, that will make this problem more and more severe. Okay, so the other way to look at this, the distribution problem, is to look at like how the dynamics along the distribution has changed. So here what I'm plotting is the 10th percentile of the prices. Okay, so at this price level, right, 10% of the houses are sold at below that price level and 90% are sold above that price level. And then 25th percentile, 75th percentile, and 90th percentile. So of course you can see that all these prices has increased pretty dramatically over the years. Okay, but one of the things I want you to look at this is the dynamics has dramatically shifted. Okay, so here what I'm showing you is I'm breaking down the data into two sample periods. The first period is from 2001 to 2010, where of course during that period we had a great recession. And then the second period is 2010 to 2020. And look at the annual average growth rate in those two different periods. Okay, so at the bottom of the market, at the lower end of the market, you can see the house prices actually decreased from 2001 to 2010. Okay, annual rate minus 5%. Okay, of course, a lot of that 5% is because of the Great Recession. But look at what happened in the last decade, 2010 to 2020. The annual growth rate of the prices at the lower end has been increasing at 12% every year. Okay, and this, once you move a little bit up to the 25th percentile, the price also decreased during from 2001 to 2010, minus 1%, but it increased at 8.37% in the last decade. As you move up, you will see that the difference between these two sample periods are going to shrink. Okay, so growth rate on the high end is much lower during in the last decade than the growth rate in the lower end. Okay, so if you worry about housing affordability, then the lower end is the thing we need to be worried about. And these numbers look bad in terms of housing affordability. Okay, so, and these numbers are of course even worse, right, during COVID. Everything is like double-digit increase. And I I guess this trend will continue if we do not do anything about it. Okay, so housing affordability might become a very important issue going forward. Okay, so the other way to look at this problem is to look at, instead of looking at the prices, let's look at like the income levels that's required to afford these houses. Okay, so here what I'm showing you is the income level that you need to have to be able to afford the 10th percentile price and 25th percentile price and the median price. So we made, of course, a lot of assumptions. Okay, so when we say affordable, that means you should not be spending more than 30% of your gross income in housing related expense. That includes mortgage payments, insurance, homeowner insurance, and utilities. Okay, so in 2005, you only need $32,000 to afford a 10th percentile house, and then 42,000 for a 25th percentile, and $55,000 for a median house. Okay, but in 2020, you will need $50,000 to be able to afford a 10th percentile price. Okay, and almost $63,000 to be able to afford a 25th percentile house, and $80,000 to be able to afford a median priced house. Okay, so one of the things I want to say is, once we move out of COVID, once the Federal Reserve started to taper, that means they started to raise the interest rate. These numbers will be a lot higher. Okay, so I do not think that even after the Federal Reserve started to raise interest rate, I do not think the house prices will decrease. However, the mortgage interest rate will increase. Okay, that means the income levels you need to have to be able to afford these houses will also increase. Okay, so the affordability issue might become even worse after we get out of COVID. Okay, so far that's all about the single family house. So now let me talk a little bit about the other owner occupied housing market. So this one shows you the price during COVID for the other owner occupied. So these are condos, townhomes, and you can see, of course, the price has also increased pretty dramatically. And if you look at annual rate, let's say going from September of 2020 to September of 2021, the growth rate in prices is 16.4%, remarkably similar to the single family market, which was 16.3%. And the same thing happens for the days on the market. Okay, so even in these multifamily markets, the days on market reached like 4 days in May of 2021. This market is also very tight. It's not just the single family owner occupied, it's also these other multifamily owner occupied markets. The same thing shows up. And in terms of the percent that are sold above listing prices, again, before COVID, almost nothing, like less than 10%. But during COVID, in May and June of 2021, about 50% of those multifamily houses are sold above their listing prices. Okay, so this tells you not only the single family market is hot and tight, the multifamily owner occupied market is also hot and tight. Okay, so now let me transition a little bit to kind of the homeowners experience during the pandemic, because there are many stories about how homeowners may have suffered during the pandemic. So I want to mention that this is based on a new survey conducted by the US Census Bureau during COVID. But unfortunately, we only can aggregate the data at the state level. So here what I'm presenting to you is based on all data for North Carolina, not just for Charlotte. So from this pulse survey related to the housing market, what I'm showing you here is the percent of homeowners that are behind on mortgage payments during COVID. So of course we can only have data since they started this collecting data on these housing related items. So starting from this is a bi-weekly survey, so they do the survey every 2 weeks. So starting from October 19th, 2020 to September 29th, 2021. Okay, so as you can see, there's substantial fraction of households that are behind on their mortgage payments during COVID. Okay, so the red line shows you all households. So for all households, it reached the highest in the middle of November 2020, around 10%. However, the pain is obviously not even, right? So if you look at African American homeowners or Hispanic homeowners, the percentage of those homeowners behind on mortgage payments are much, much higher. Okay, so again, in the middle of November 2020, almost 29% of African American homeowners are behind on their mortgage payments. Okay, so this shows you kind of the impact of the COVID on these homeowners. And the other way to look at it is to break it down by income levels. So the survey of categorized income in terms of these like 8 brackets. So as you can see, most of the pain is again felt by people on the lower end of the income levels. Okay, people earning less than $25,000 or earning between $25,000 and $35,000. Those are the people that are really suffering during the COVID in terms of trying to make their mortgage payments. All right, so those are the owner-occupied market. Now let me transition a little bit to the rental market now. So for the rental market, I'm gonna start with the multifamily market first, because that's what most of the rental market is. So here what I'm showing you is the number of apartment units. So this data comes from CoStar, which tracks like large scale apartment units. So it does not include very small apartments, mostly large scale. So this is the number of units that are tracked by CoStar from 2000 to 2021. So as you can see that this area has added a lot of rental units, okay, more than 100,000 housing units since 2000 until now. Okay, so however, if you look at rent, okay, so this gives you the effective rent per unit and effective rent per square foot. Of course, the dynamics looks very similar. Okay, so again, I really want to break down into like before 2010 and after 2010. So if you look at before 2010, apartment rent has been decreasing, right, in the Charlotte area. However, the apartment rent has been increasing very steadily since 2010, after we get out of the recession. Okay, and one very important thing to look at is this is 2020, this is 2021. As you can see, the rent actually sharply increased into 2010 to 2021 during COVID. Okay, so the average effective rent increased by 16.6% from 2020 to 2021. Okay, so remember, the annual house price growth rate was 16.3% for single family, 16.4% for multifamily houses. Now what we are seeing is the average effective rent increased 16.6% during the same period. Okay, from here, what I can say is the kind of crazy price growth rate we saw during COVID probably is not a bubble because it's really supported by rents. Okay, it's not just because people are just buying those houses and keep it vacant and wait for the price to increase. It's real demand because the rent got to be real demand. If you see rent increase like 16.6%, then it's not surprising that price is also going to be increasing, if not more than 16.6%, because we are also experiencing lower interest rates. Okay, so given this, it's very unlikely that the house price we are seeing is kind of bubble. I don't think so. It's supported by strong demand. It's supported by extremely limited supply. So, and if you break down into quarters, the first quarter 3.6%, second quarter 6.8%, third quarter 5.4%. So it seems like it's kind of cooling down a little bit, which is expected. You cannot expect the market to like increase like crazy forever, but it's not increasing, right? So we also gonna do like the same thing in terms of like look at the rents by different quality. Here we say class A, class B, class C. So class A is the highest quality apartments. Class C is the kind of the lowest quality apartment. One of the things that we observed, let's just focus on from 2010 to 2020, is that the lower end, the class C apartments, has been increasing at a higher rate than the class A's and class B's. However, it's not the case from 2020 to 2021. From 2020 to 2021, it's the high end that increases at a much higher rate. Okay, so the reason is during COVID, because a lot of people got stuck at home or work from home. They really need to have high quality space for whatever their needs. Okay, so that drove up the price a lot. So those multifamily rental market, so we draw the data from the CoStar. Now let me talk a little bit about the single family rental market, because this market also becomes more and more important. We are seeing more and more single family rentals out there. So for this data, I'm again going to be using the Canopy data. So they have those single family investors who list their properties on their service for rent. So this is where this data comes from. So this is the median and average rent during COVID for these single family rentals. Okay, so and one of the things is there is also a huge increase in terms of median rent during COVID. So January 2020, the median rent to rent a single family house in this area was $1,500 per month. September 2021, $1,900. Okay, that's a 26.7% increase. Of course, this is not annual. If you convert it into annual, it's again 16.5% increase, annual increase. So again, you see rent increases at the same pace as the price. This basically says that price increase is not a bubble. Okay, it's very unlikely the price increase is a bubble. Okay, it's supported by strong demand. Okay, so, and we can also take a long-term view to look at the kind of rental growth rate from 2003 to 2020, because 2003 is the year that Canopy started to have these kind of data on single family rentals. Okay, so again, you can see that the rents has been increasing in the recent years at a much higher rate than before. Okay, and the other thing is to look at, here we have the size. So I'm gonna categorize into 1 to 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom, 4 bedroom, or more than 4 bedroom. right? One thing you can see is, again, before 2020, the lower end and actually increased at slightly higher rate, but in 2020, we again see that the high end increases at a higher rate because people really want to have a larger house during COVID because they're going to work from home. Okay, so that's another kind of dynamic that's really important here. And of course, to assess how tight the market is, we can also look at the days on the market during COVID, right? So from in January 2020, the days on the market, that is, if you list a single family house for rental on the service until the property is on a contract, on a lease contract, the median days was 35 in January 2020, right? And it went all the way down to less than 10 days in August 2020, and it went up a little bit. Those are mostly seasonal because those are like during winter, usually you will see that the market gets cooled down a little bit. But once we are out of winter, you can see that the median days on the market for these single family rentals also went down to 7 days, right? So the rental market, single family rental market is just as hot or as tight as the single family owner occupied market. All right. So, and this is again historical, right? So this is, if we look at long term from 2003 to 2010, we have never been that tight. The market has never been that tight. Okay, 2016 was already pretty tight with like 18 days on the market, but 2020 is low and 2021 is even lower. So again, this market is also at a very, very like historical tight market right now. Okay, so it's not just the owner occupied sales market, it also happens in the rental market. All right, so I'm also gonna be talking a little bit about the renters' experience during the pandemic. Again, I'm going to use the census household pulse survey data conducted during COVID, right? And again, this is for the state of North Carolina, not just for Charlotte. Okay, so the first figure I'm showing you is the percent of renters that are behind on rental payments. Okay, so the red line is for all renters. Okay, and then I break down by race and ethnicity. So as you can see, a lot of renters suffered quite a lot during COVID. Okay, so the number has been jumping around 15% to 20% range. That is about 15 to 20% of all renters are behind on their rental payments during this period, during COVID. Okay, and in August of this year, that number actually reached almost 30%. Okay, think about that. 30% of renters are behind on their rental payments. Okay, and if we break down by race, again, we see that African American renters suffered a lot more. Okay, so their numbers has been hovering around like 20%, 30%, or in several months, that number was even behind, even above 40%. More than 40% of African American renters were behind on rental payments. Okay, and similar things happen for Hispanic. Okay, so like 25-30% of Hispanic renters are behind on their rental payments during much of the COVID pandemic. Okay. And again, we can also split this number by income, right? So the same kind of income brackets that the survey collects. So as you can see, again, you can see what's on the top are really those low income renters, okay? Renters with annual income less than 25,000, renters with annual income between $25,000 and $35,000. Okay, so for renters with income less than $25,000, like almost like 30-40% of them were behind on rental payments during most of the COVID pandemic, right? And it reached 46-47% in August of 2021. Okay, so you may wonder why August 2021? That's like a lot of the stimulus actually ended, right? So that's kind of not surprising. But if this is a very massive figure, I know, but if you look at that, these numbers are all very elevated during much of the COVID pandemic, except for people really with their income at the high end of the distribution. Okay, so for renters, the Pulse survey also collects data asking them whether they think they will face eviction in the next month. So this is, I have to say, this is not actual eviction, but this is the renters' perception or belief that whether they're going to be facing eviction during next month. Okay, so here, again, I'm going to plot for all renters. So you can see that for all renters, anywhere between like 4 or 5% of these renters think they may get evicted by next month during COVID. But of course, the eviction is also not even across different races and ethnicity. So for African American renters, okay, those numbers is a lot higher. We are looking at 7-8% on average, but in some months the number can be more than 10%. Okay, in the highest during April, in the middle of April of 2021, the number was 15%. So 15% of African American renters thought they might get evicted during that period. And for Hispanic renters, they probably kind of struggled a little bit even more. Okay, in some surveys, more than 20% of them having this risk of being evicted during next month. So this is also kind of shows you how difficult this was for renters during COVID. And again, we can break down these numbers by their income levels. So again, you will see that most of the spikes happen for at the lower end. Okay, so again, all these pains are unevenly felt by people with different income levels. All right, so that's pretty much what I'm going to say today, but there are a lot more in the report, right? So if you want to know more details, please go ahead and download, or you can read online our report, right? So here I just want to summarize like the main findings of this year's report. Okay, so as you can see, or I hope you are convinced now that house prices and rents increased at extremely high rates during COVID. Okay, so if you want a number, 16% annual growth rate for house prices, for rents. And I do not believe this is a bubble. This is driven by a strong demand and an extremely limited supply. So supply is extremely tight. Okay, so, and I do not think the price will decrease. The price will continue to increase at a pretty high rate, probably not as high as what we just experienced during COVID, but it's still going to be very high rate. Okay, unless we can do something on the supply side. And because I do not think we can do much on the demand side, and I do not even think we should be doing anything on the demand side, because we want the city to grow. We want Charlotte to be a better place. Because of that, the demand will keep increasing. Okay, so the only thing that we can do to alleviate like the worsening housing affordability problem is trying to solve this problem from the supply side. Try to increase the supply of houses. Okay, owner-occupied, rental, high quality, low quality, small, large. Anything can help, could help. We just need to increase supply to be able to accommodate the growth that Charlotte deserves. Okay, and finally, this report also shows you that homeowners and renters actually suffered quite a lot during COVID. All right, thank you very much. That's my presentation.
All right, so now we'll be doing the question and answer part with Dr. Chu. So thank you, Dr. Chu. We've had quite a few questions come in, and if you have questions on your mind after seeing the presentation for Dr. Chu, please just put them in the chat and we'll get to as many of them as we can. So let me just start with a couple questions about potential decreases in home prices. So let me sort of ask it a couple different ways as folks have, as they've come in on the chat. So, there's a question of, do you think home values will decline, causing buyers to lose equity in their current purchases, or just, will the growth slow? Another one is really asking a question related to interest rates. So, could you elaborate on why you think home prices will not decrease with an increase in interest rates? A number, this particular person has realtor colleagues who believe that prices will begin to slow or decrease slightly as a result of increases in interest rates. So let's start there.
So first of all, you're absolutely right that the interest rate will eventually increase. However, given the strong demand, so not all the demand was driven by a lower interest rate. We do see people really want to buy houses during the COVID, right? So the interest rate, of course, will lead to a relatively weaker demand, but I don't think that's going to drive the price to decrease. The only thing that will happen is the prices will probably increase at a lower rate. We are not going to be seeing like 16.3% growth rate going forward, okay? But what we saw, let's say before COVID, in our last year report, we saw that the prices in the region grew at 8%. And a year before was like 6 to 7%. So the trend is, regardless of interest rate, we are seeing the prices growing at a higher rate. Okay, of course, COVID is very extreme and interest rate played a role, but what I can see is going forward, we are still going to be seeing price increase, but at a lower rate than what we experienced during COVID.
Got it. So shifting a little bit to other things going on. So, one question is, and this is about sort of people moving. So, is the demand being caused by people moving into the area, or is it individuals moving within the region? Do you have any way to know that based on the data that you have?
So we have not looked at that. So there's no way we can see where the person come from. So first of all, so moving within this region, if let's say the population is fixed, then moving within this region should not cause a like extra demand unless people just want to live in larger houses, which happened during COVID. Okay, so that contributes to a strong demand. But we also see a lot of anecdotal evidence that people are moving from outside this area to this area, especially because they can work from home. So people are moving from high cost areas like New York to Charlotte area because this city is great. We have a lot to offer, and working from home is great for them. And our house price relative to New York is still low. Okay, so that fuels up a strong demand for the Charlotte area.
So interesting. One of the comment came in the chat while you were answering this, suggesting that household formation is on the rise. So, maybe millennials, mostly among the millennial group. So that may be another source of increased demand if they're moving out of their parents' homes and into a new household. So, one question coming from Danielle from Axios Charlotte is, what do you think are the biggest barriers to adding more supply at this point?
So during COVID, there was a lot of barriers of supply. So, for example, the cost of raw material, everybody heard about lumber cost being like fourfold higher than normal, but it has since like decreased quite a lot. And then nowadays, I think another thing is labor shortages. So if you want to build houses, you need like qualified construction workers, but the labor shortage is a real thing right now. So it's really kind of restrict our ability to quickly adding more supply. The other thing is, of course, regulation and policy that should not be like restricting new construction, new development, right? I hope that policy becomes more friendly to new development to accommodate the growth that Charlotte is experiencing.
When we were talking earlier, you also mentioned that the panel that'll be coming on after we're done with this Q&A is also going to be open to answering policy-oriented questions. So we'll save some of those for them. I wanted to ask you a question about foreclosures and individuals, either renters or homeowners, not making mortgage payments or rental payments. So, what is your thought about, the impact on foreclosures in the short run and any impact that those foreclosures might have on the housing in proximity to those foreclosures?
So during this pandemic, or you can think of this as a crisis, we actually did not see a lot of foreclosures. Of course, a lot of reasons, right? Although we see like people behind on their mortgage payments, but that didn't lead to foreclosure because a lot of these like mortgage forbearance programs that allowed them to delay the mortgage payments. So we are not seeing that. So, and the other thing is, as long as the house prices are increasing, I do not think foreclosure is going to be a problem, because if house prices are increasing, why you want to leave your house? Okay, the worst thing can happen to you is, even if you cannot make mortgage payment, you can just sell your house and then make the mortgage, repay all the mortgage. You should, because you will have more equity in the house when house prices are increasing. So I do not think that foreclosure is going to be a huge thing, at least for now.
So I know you've been really able to dig into the data more than many, folks in your position, because of the access that we've had to data in our region. But do you have any sense of how other cities in the Carolinas or around the country are faring with respect to these results?
So I've seen many kind of other thing, other like summary statistics for many cities. So they're probably similar, but I think what Charlotte experienced. So let's say other cities maybe experience like 12% in most like North Carolina cities, but Charlotte is kind of on top of that list in terms of the price growth rate. Of course, I've heard like many also like dramatic increases in like Dallas or Austin, Texas, but probably not in North Carolina.
Got it. Yeah. Um, Another set of questions around investors and cash buyers entering into the market. So I just, what is your sense of their impact on, single family, multifamily markets in particular?
So we do see like a lot more like cash or institutional buyers. I actually digged into, but did not present it. We have about 25% um, market share of all those institution buyers combined together. Okay, so Zillow, Open Door, OfferPad, all those, and then there are also like private real estate equity are buying those houses. So I briefly looked at it. So first of all, the group as a whole are not paying higher prices than the regular individual buyers, right? So, however, if you look at like, let's single out Zillow and Open Door, they actually pay higher prices. Okay, so that's probably also why Zillow decides to close their business because they're not making money. So for like houses Zillow bought and sold, Zillow only entered this market 2021. For houses bought and sold by Zillow in this year, 157 houses, the return they got on those houses, the average is 6%. Okay, so 6%, that's just a commission. Okay, so if they spend anything renovating, they're not making money. So that's my understanding of this market.
Got it. And, a sort of big picture question for you, how does this overall scenario that we find ourselves in with respect to housing impact our stability as a leading city in the US? Does it, make us more or less competitive in terms of attracting new workforce? Any thoughts on that?
So currently, I think Charlotte is still very competitive. We attract business, we attract people trying to move into the area. However, if we allow this trend to continue, at some point, people will think, okay, moving to Charlotte does not make sense because the housing there is really expensive. So we want to accommodate Charlotte's growth with the appropriate house prices. Okay, so we want Charlotte to grow, but we also want Charlotte to be affordable.
Are there any impacts of COVID that you see sort of bouncing housing prices back at all, or rental prices back after the pandemic is over? I mean, do you think that is there any evidence that people's tastes for, smaller places or less land will evolve?
I have not seen that. I have not seen that. So if you look at the houses people buy at the start of the COVID, we see like slightly increase in the size of the houses. But since we have not seen like dramatic decreases in the houses, even during this year.
Got it. Okay. So, one more question for you. You mentioned a little bit, we've talked about rental housing growth, the increase in the growth of rent for individuals. And could you just talk a little bit about, what was driving that demand for a growth in rental housing, rental prices?
It's probably because we are seeing so similar numbers, it's probably the same kind of driving forces. So people are moving here, just a strong demand, and I don't see, because originally I thought people probably would want to move into single family owner occupied, but the problem is that market was really tight. You want to buy a house, it's very difficult. Then all that translate into strong demand for rental apartment. So that's, I guess, what happened.
Right, right. And, you know, I mean, we have this fixed supply of land, right? And so that's always a constraint for us. There have been a number of questions in the chat that have really asked about different types of regulations that we might consider, or just the opposite, loosening regulations. And my understanding is that the next panel might be open to answering those questions and might be a good set of individuals to really ask those sorts of questions. Is there anything else that you'd like to say about regulations, though, before we wrap up?
So I'm not gonna delve into like specific regulations. The only thing I want to say is, I mean, if you look at like the metro area, we still have a lot of land. Okay, so we just need to like spend some effort trying to make those land available for development. That's all what we need to do to like increase housing supply. But that's easy said than done, of course.
Sure. Yeah, there's complexities around that too. Transportation in particular is a constraint. So yeah, well, you know, thank you so much for your presentation today, Dr. Chu. And I just want to thank all of our research partners. Thank you for all, you know, thanks to all of you for continuing your support. You really make this important research possible for our community. So the State of Housing Virtual Summit will continue after a 5-minute break with an industry panel discussion on owner-occupied homes and rental housing. So we would ask that you all stay tuned, and thank you all for attending this part of the presentation today.